In one piece, we have seen the empty throne and the weapons surrounding it, placed there by the 20 kings whose kingdoms comprised the origin point of the world government as we know it today. This was done as a sign, a symbol, if you will, a symbol of equality between them. While in the current era we know that this was supplanted by Emu and his rule, there is a strong chance that the group, aside possibly Lily, had no idea this was going to happen. Now, in all the scenes of the throne we have seen thus far, the weapons, the swords, the axes, have not really looked like anything special. We now know that this is definitely not the case. In fact, it appears as if those 20 kings and queens were all respectable, high-level combatants. In chapter 1189, Summers tells us that using Omen, Emu has resurrected these legendary weapons, and that the three of them are now wielding them. What weapons have been revealed so far? And what can we glean about their real-world origins and in-story current or potential abilities? That is the question for today's video. Now, a common theme that came up in writing this is weapons having the ability to cut through all things. That's very common in mythology. While I'm unsure if Oda would give this to every one of them in the story, I included it in the relevant sections anyway. So with that, grab a drink, grab some snacks, and let us get into the weapons that have been revealed so far. And here, we have our first sword, and it is in the hand of Saint Shepherd Summers. So the Shepherd family ancestry sword is called Graham, right? Now in mythology, Graham originates from the Norse mythology, and it is also known as the Sword of Wrath. In the legends, it is first wielded by Sigmund, who becomes an unbeatable warrior. But how did Sigmund come to become its wielder? Well, it happened during a wedding for his sister Signy. During the feast of this wedding, an unknown man appears. This individual is later revealed to be the god Odin. He thrusts the sword into a tree there, exclaiming that the man capable of pulling the sword from this tree would become its owner. After this, Odin departed, and man after man after man tried and failed miserably, until Sigmund stepped up, who successfully drew it, pulling it from the tree with ease, no less, as if he had been chosen. This sword would eventually fall into the hands of Sigurd, who was Sigmund's son, and Sigurd used it in an epic battle to slay Fafnir, who in many ways is similar to Nidhogg. Fitting, if you know what I mean. Let's also have a look at its abilities, shown both in mythology and in the story. It is a sword forged to slay a dragon, possessing unmatched sharpness, possessing the ability to retain its durability even when it is broken and reforged. And of course, the aforementioned supernatural capability of slaying a dragon. This makes it fitting that in chapter 1183, we see Emu using it against Loki, Nidhogg, notably a dragon. Now this was before we knew that this was a separate weapon itself. The way Emu used it really made it look like it was an extension of his glaive, right? Like he was pulling out or using Omen to transform his glaive into a different type of weapon. Now we kind of know that he's really summoning these 19 weapons, and maybe because Omen is the power that is fueling all of this to begin with, he can use them individually or fuse them with that glaive. That glaive maybe even is the Nerona family weapon. Later on, I mentioned another weapon I think that might be the Neurona family, but now that I'm actually recording this, I think that it might be that glaive we see him initially. And he can use that to channel the other weapons, right? But when he uses Graham, it is coated in his black Maki flames. And while we do not see it make direct contact with Loki, as Emu was using it to block one of Loki's attacks, we can assume if it had connected, it would have done some serious damage. I am willing to bet that in One Piece, it is not exclusively extra effective against dragons, but instead against anyone or anything with a high durability who normally wouldn't be affected by normal weapons. And the current individual facing it has this, both in his blades and himself. That being Zoro. We mentioned earlier, Graham hails from the Shepherd family. That is why Summers is wielding it. It looks like Summers and Killingham were granted not all the weapons like Emu has, but just the ones hailing from their families. Summers also seems to be combining it with his Thorn Devil Fruit ability. Having learned the nature of this sword, I'm starting to think that Zoro might actually lose one of his swords here from it being broken in the battle. My guess for this is the Kitetsu blade, the Sandai Kitetsu. I don't see Enma being broken, and there's no way the Wado Ichimonji is being broken. So if one of Zoro's swords is going to go down here, it is certainly going to be the Sandai Kitetsu. I think he has the Sandai, whatever his Kitetsu blade is. And I also think that this might lead to him attaining his first black blade by the end of the fight as part of his victory, right? Like, let's say Conqueror's Haki and its mastery is a component in the forging of a black blade, perhaps Enma or the Wado. But you know what? That's a story for another video. For this one, moving on, let us have a look at the next weapon. The next weapon on our list is Fragarach, the sword of the sea god. Hailing from Irish mythology, the legends state that it once belonged to the sea god Manan MacLear, before being passed on to the hero Lugh. The sword is known to be capable of bypassing any defenses, or at the very least armor that could deflect any other weapon. It also possesses the ability to control the wind, which was namely used in combat. We have not seen Emu do much with it yet in the story, aside impaling an already shish kebabbed Luffy. But I would not be surprised if it, like its mythological counterpart, is also able to do standard things like bypassing defenses, or some form of Maki-based elemental control, even if it wasn't specifically wind. Given how it is also linked with the sea god directly, I cannot help but wonder if it incorporates sea stone in some way, or even a progenitor of sea stone, whatever that might be. Or even without this, can serve as a natural counter to devil fruits, again similar to sea stone or even Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi. This could come in the form of its bypassing defense capability, or by weakening or nullifying devil fruits. It is hard to tell in this scenario because Luffy is already weakened by the life-draining aspect of Bohu or Void. We'll go over that one next. But I have a feeling that if this was exceptionally effective against devil fruits, these two together might have pushed Luffy out of Gear 5. Of course, this is Luffy we're talking about, and maybe he can totally hold up to it. But I am starting to question if that's the case. It would be cool, though. It would be cool if some of those abilities from mythology were carried into the story in those ways. And now we have Bohu, or Void, the sword of nothingness. The sword that is currently turning Luffy into that very same nothingness. Unlike the others we have covered so far, I do not believe that Bohu is inspired directly by a sword from mythology, but instead a theme found in ancient Hebrew texts and in the Old Testament. If we look here, we find a phrase stating Tohu wa Bohu, which might be where the names Tohu and Bohu come from in the chapter. This means formless and empty. In One Piece, Oda connects this with that of a void. And the power we have seen it demonstrate thus far is the literal ability to drain life, effectively turning anything it touches, or even that is near it, into a formless husk of what it once was. With enough exposure anyway. Right, the trees started losing their life instantly. Luffy obviously is still in Gear 5, Gear 5th, so he's not totally cooked yet, but I cannot imagine this feels good. And again, yeah, this was a brutal weapon used against Luffy, because it basically means that his life force or energy is constantly being drained the entire time he's impaled by this weapon, really making it incredibly difficult or just next to impossible for him to escape on his own. I think it is quite possible, or at least I thought that it is quite possible, that this blade hails from the Nerona family. Through writing and recording, I'm starting to think that Imu's original glaive weapon is probably the Nerona family weapon. That's why it's his point of origin, his chosen weapon. And so that would mean Bohu came from one of the other families. But still, it kind of seems to fall in line with his devil fruit powers, right? His devil's fruit. But even with some of the themes he represents in the story, such as his attempts to prevent the dawn of the world and keep everyone and everything in an eternal darkness. So I could see either one of these, his glaive, which I don't think has been named yet, or Bohu being the Nerona family relic. Before we continue, if you like the video, if you like listening to what I have to say, if you simply love my beard that needs to be trimmed, I would implore you, invite you to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon. Many people, the majority of people who watch the channel are not actually subscribed. And while that is okay, people should do what they want, I would certainly appreciate those who do choose to move forward with this. It is very important for small channels. Mine is not even a small channel yet. It's a micro channel. I'm below that small channel threshold. So I can guarantee you that I would greatly appreciate it. But with that, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Now, we have the spear of the Remo Shifu family, Longinus. In history, it is said that this spear was used to pierce Jesus Christ by a Roman soldier who was confirming his passing. Tradition of the Christian Church states that upon this act, the Roman soldier, who was later named Longinus, was splashed with the blood and water of the Lord, which cured him of his poor eyesight. Having witnessed this, Longinus converted to Christianity and is now recognized as a saint. In folklore, the spear possesses unique powers as well, such as allowing its holder to control their own destiny or even that of the world, which is pretty crazy. While I do not see it being this powerful in One Piece, I could see it holding similar unique effects, such as blocking or preventing the use of observation haki in some way, hence denying the opponents of claiming their destiny. Or being able to pierce any target, here's that theme coming up again, even the gods that it may have once stood against. Right now, Killingham is wielding this spear against Sanji, and I wonder if it will be able to do such things as bypassing his Germa defenses, his physical enhancements from Germa. or as mentioned before, blocking his use of observation haki, which is Sanji's specialty of the three. And as such, being part of what forces him to unlock the use of and begin to master his Conqueror's haki, right? Like if he loses his German enhancements, if he loses his observation haki, albeit temporarily, this may create a scenario where he really has to focus in on unlocking Conqueror's haki and probably even coding and using that as a means of defeating Killingham. Next up, we have Nemesis, described as the sword of divine punishment, a sword symbolizing retribution. Nemesis does not seem to relate directly to any one mythical weapon in the way Longinus or Graham does. Instead, it is described as a blade of judgment. Visually, it looks very similar to Yoru, so similar that I can't help but wonder if they are connected in some way. One example of this would be if Yoru is a supreme grade recreation of Nemesis, a inspiration that a swordsmith past the Void Century had in creating their weapon. While there may not be any direct inspirations to a mythical weapon, Nemesis is a Greek goddess, a daughter of Nyx, in fact. It is said that her role was a regulator of justice and moral balance. While this could take the form of simply punishing one for their hubris, that was not always the case. I think the story of this blade might be similar, right? We know that the 20 kings banded together to topple the ancient kingdom, who perhaps in their very same hubris tried to be gods. The original wielder of Nemesis may have wished to punish this and bring their form of justice to the world. We have yet to see it display any distinct powers that are, unique to it, but it was capable of dealing a great deal of damage to Loki when Emu channeled it through his glaive. If the weapon were to be wielded on its own, it may even possess some form of unique ability like some of the others, or even when channeled through Emu's glaive and he just didn't use it, right? Or maybe it's not something you can see directly, So an example of this that I think could be cool is if Nemesis could tip the balance of a fight in favor of the wielder, basically achieving the effect of bringing about their own personal justice. So, we saw Emu just stab Loki with it, and this might just be because Emu's a monster, and he is the stronger of the two. But there could even have been, some kind of extra effect from Nemesis that, again, tipped the scales even more towards Emu, and made the strike against Loki even more true than it already was. Moving along, we have Stigma, which is like a cursed, wrathful blade, a sword of a vengeful demon. The way Emu wields Stigma reminds me a lot of Ichimaru Gin from Bleach, and that he is capable of extending the blade out to pierce his opponent. Now, Emu uses this in conjunction with Omen, which serves as a mark for tracking the attack. It is not known if Stigma can extend on its own without this marking, though. Again, it is known as a cursed, wrathful, or vengeance-seeking blade, which might be why its ability allows it to extend and track down its target. The word stigma represents a mark of disgrace or divine wounds, something of the sort, usually permanent. It can bring shame, judgment, and an overall bad opinion of the person or thing that it is placed on. It has other meanings as well. Completely unrelated, In science, the top of the organ in a female flower that catches pollen is called the stigma. Not unlike how in One Piece, the sword can catch its target as if placing a stigma upon it. Next up, we have the Xingtian Axe. This weapon is almost certainly inspired by the Chinese deity who holds the same name. He is an individual who fights against the supreme divinity Huangdi. However, he loses this conflict for supremacy and is decapitated, with his head being buried deep, deep in the mountains. Yet, this would not mark the end of the conflict for Xingtian, as he took up his shield and axe once more, and using his nipples as eyes, and his belly button as a mouth. Pretty funny picture, I'll have it on screen. He continues the fight. He would eventually regenerate himself and continue his defiance until the end of time. It is fitting that such a story serves as inspiration for a weapon that itself was used in defiance. Defiance against the Great Kingdom. And while we don't know the exact fate of its wielder, we do know that in some respect, unlike Xingtian himself, they eventually did win in the end. We do not get to see what abilities this axe holds, as Imu's attack against Luffy with it was blocked by Scopper Gaban. But because it's the current weapon in his hand, we might get to see more of what it can do in the coming chapters. And honestly, I don't have any great guesses for this one right now, unlike a lot of the other ones. But if you have any thoughts on what this weapon might be able to do, please leave them in the comments below. And the final named weapon for now, again, we don't know all 20 of them, it is Muramasa. I believe that Muramasa might be the original cursed blade in the story of One Piece, the one that started them all. In Legends, it is said that the swordsmith Muramasa underwent a challenge with his master Masamune. They both forged swords holding their names, Muramasa and Masamune, and placed them in a river. Muramasa's cut through everything in its path: leaves, fish, the air, and the water itself. Whereas Masamune's blade was much more peaceful. It would let leaves drift by and swimming fish pass unharmed. What we can glean from this is that the blade Muramasa is bloodthirsty and wants nothing more than to cut. The legends go on to state that Muramasa the swordsmith was mentally unstable, insane even, and this personality of his was forged deep into the steel of his blade. Whichever kingdom owned this weapon, I suspect it was forged not by its wielder itself, but by a swordsmith member of said kingdom. And that as the first ever cursed blade, it gained a name for itself in battle, in the hands of its king, cutting down everything and everyone in its path. And that this relentless nature is what spurred future swordsmiths into crafting cursed blades of their own. Now let's talk about how many weapons we think Imu has access to. I ran a poll on my channel asking this very question, and as you can see on the screen, I gave the options of all 20, 19, 18, and other. YouTube only lets us put 4. I put 18 and other in here in the event that Imu has lost or for some reason is unable to resurrect or use every single one of the weapons. The prevailing victor here was 19 though, with, at the time of recording, 88% of the votes. And this is where I land as well. This stems from the idea that because Lily and the Nefertari family defected before the real start of the world government's rule, that their family weapon was never placed at the empty throne. And as such, it is still out there in the world, maybe in Alabasta, maybe hidden somewhere even different than that. In any case, somewhere unavailable to Emu. So while we are here, let us have a look at what sort of weapon the Nefertari family might have. The city of Alabasta is largely inspired by ancient Egypt. And there is one weapon from that time period that I believe could be represented here in One Piece. And that is the dagger of King Tutankhamun. In the story, I could see it being a dagger, or I could also see it being sized up to a more regular sword. But let's talk about why this pick would be unique in the story of One Piece. The defining feature of the dagger is that it is not made from materials found on Earth, but rather made out of a meteorite from space. It was crafted in an era before iron smelting had begun in Egypt. And overall, its existence in general is a point of fascination. It is said that the dagger held divine authority and could even channel the power of the cosmos itself. The reason I think this would be neat in One Piece is because we know that people and likely objects have come to Blue Planet from outer space. And I could see a weapon forged from such materials coming from one of the original 20 kingdoms. Of course, in this case, Alabasta. Some of the abilities these weapons hold may overlap, but I think one facet of this one that would be cool, like many before it, is if it possessed the ability to cut any and all things. But the unique aspect of it would be specifically that the wielder desires. So, whereas Muramasa is just going to cut everything no matter what, this weapon would cut only what the wielder wanted, but without the ability for resistance to be met. Or, if Oda doesn't want to make weapons that broken in One Piece, very, very challenging to block. This means it could be harmless to allies and practically a force of nature, or close to that of enemies. I could even see it being involved in the creation of the poneglyphs in some way. One of the only things in the world capable of carving sea stone. It might also be cool if it in some way had an ability to protect allies, or if it's indestructible, right? Transfer damage to itself in some way. A unique ability that a, kinder or better or a good leader would want crafted into their specialty weapon. And given how advanced the times were during the Ancient Kingdom, I could totally see something like this being possible. It is likely this weapon still exists out there somewhere, and we just don't know where it is. Or if someone like Vivi and before her Cobra know where it is, it has not been revealed to us in any way. That being said, these of course are just some of the ideas that crossed my mind when I read the chapter. And that does it for this video. I'm really trying to practice a combination of thoroughly scripted, well put together videos and not so scripted, more, just my initial thoughts type discussions, the reviews I've been doing like this as well, kind of to give a mix of two different types of videos on this channel. Not only is it more fun for me this way, I get to practice building up different skill sets, but I think it kind of offers a little bit of both depending on what people might be looking for. So if you have a preference, please let me know in the comments below. If you have any thoughts on the named weapons that I didn't talk about, I'd love to hear about that as well. When I was originally making this video, I planned to pitch what other legendary weapons might show up in this count of 19, but that would have made this video too long, And so that might be saved for a potential follow-up, a part 2, if you will. And I can take some of the ideas that are left in comments and bring it into that one. Of course, also, if you want, if your heart so desires, like and subscribe, hit the bell icon. As I said earlier, I would greatly appreciate it. And with that, I would like each and every one of you to have an excellent rest of your day.